Hi, my name is Camille, and this is Book 4, Chapter 5 Blessings. Book 4, Chapter 5. And now, my son Methuselah, I will show thee all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before thee. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first, when I was learning to write. The second, before I took my mother, I saw a terrible vision. And regarding them, I prayed to the Lord. I had laid me down in the house of my grandfather, Mahalaleel. I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems, and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up to cry aloud, and said, The earth is destroyed. And my grandfather Mahalaleel waked me as I lay near him, and said unto me, Why dost thou cry so, my son? And why dost thou make such lamentation? And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen. And he said unto me, A terrible thing hast thou seen, my son, and of grave moment is thy dream vision as to the secrets, if all the sin of the earth. It must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. And now, my son, arise and make petition to the Lord of glory, since thou art a believer, that a remnant may remain on the earth, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. My son, from heaven all this will come upon the earth, and upon the earth there will be a great destruction. After that I rose and prayed and implored and besought and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, and I will show everything to thee, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below, and seen the heaven and the sun rising in the east, and the moon setting in the west, and a few stars, and the whole earth, and everything as he had known it in the beginning, then I blessed the Lord of judgment and extolled him, because he had made the sun to go forth from the windows of the east, and he ascended and rose on the face of the heaven, and set out and kept traversing the path shown unto him. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness, and blessed the Holy and Great One, and spake with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which God has made for the children of the flesh of men, that they should speak therewith. And he gave them breath, and a tongue, and a mouth, and they should speak therewith. Blessed be thou, O Lord, King, great and mighty in thy greatness, Lord of the whole creation of the heaven, King of kings, and God of the whole world. And thy power and kingship and greatness abide for ever and ever, and throughout all generations. Thy dominion and all the heavens are thy throne for ever, and the whole earth thy footstool for ever and ever. For thou hast made, and thou rulest all things, and nothing is too hard for thee. Wisdom departs not from the place of thy throne, nor turns away from thy presence, and thou knowest and seest and hearest everything, and there is nothing hidden from thee, for thou seest everything. And now the angels of thy heavens are guilty of trespass, and upon the flesh of men abideth thy wrath until the great day of judgment. And now, O God, and Lord and great King, I implore and beseech thee to fulfill my prayer, to leave me a posterity on earth, and not destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitant, so that there should be an eternal destruction. And now, my Lord, destroy from the earth the flesh which has aroused thy wrath, but the flesh of righteousness and uprightness established as a plant of the eternal seed, and hide not thy face from the care of thy servant, O Lord. And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up and spake to his son Methuselah, to thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words, incline thy ear to the dream, vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth, and that bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer, and along with this came forth two bulls, one of them black and the other red. And that black bull gored the red one and pursued him over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer went with him. And I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. And that cow, that first one, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek that red one, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till that first bull came to her and quieted her, and from that time onward she cried no more. And after she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grow and become a great white bull, and from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him. And they began to beget many white bulls which resembled them, one following the other, many. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above, and behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and ate and pastured amongst those oxen. And after that I saw the large and black oxen, and behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heaven, and behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to the first star, and they became bulls amongst those cattle, and pastured them amongst them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen, and they all became pregnant and bare elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them, and were affrighted at them, and began to bite with their teeth, and to devour, and to gore them with their horns. And they began moreover to devour those oxen. And behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. And again I saw how they began to gore each other, and to devour each other, and the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised mine eyes again to heaven, and I saw in a vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men, and four went forth from that place, and three with them. And those three that had last came forth, grasped me by my hand, and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said unto me, Remain here till thou seest everything that befalls those elephant, camels, and asses, and the stars and the oxen, and all of them. And I saw one of those four who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it and hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked before them. And as I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of those four who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them in the abyss of the earth. And one of those four went to that white bull, and instructed him in a secret without his being terrified. He was born a bull and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel, and dwelt thereon. And three bulls dwelt with him in the vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised mine eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof, with 7 water torrents thereon, and those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were opened on the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and rise upon the surface. And I saw that enclosure till all of its surface was covered with water. And the water, the darkness, and the mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of the water, that water had risen above the height of that enclosure, and was streaming over the enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together until I saw how they sank, and were swallowed up and perished into the water. But that vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them. They were not able to escape, perish, and sank into the depths. And again I saw in the vision till those water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and those abysses were opened up. Then the water began to run down into these till the earth became visible. But that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. But that white bull which had become a man came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white like that bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And that white bull departed from them, and they began to bring forth beasts of the field and birds, so that there arose different genera: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens, and among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another. But that white bull, which was born amongst them, begat a wild ass, and a white bull with it, and the wild asses multiplied. But that bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar and a white sheep. And the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, and that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves, and they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed, cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Lord. And the sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses. And I saw the sheep how they lamented and cried and besought their Lord with all their might, till that Lord of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode and came to them and pastured them. And he called that sheep which had escaped the wolves and spake with it concerning the wolves, and it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Lord, and another sheep met it and went with it. And the two went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spake with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power, and the sheep cried aloud. And the Lord came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves, and the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet, and forthwith ceased to cry. And I saw the sheep till they departed from amongst the wolves, but the eyes of the wolves were blinded, and those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all its power. And the Lord of the sheep went with them as their leader, and all his sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached a sea of water. And that sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face, and their Lord led them and placed himself between them and the wolves. And as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of the sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and those wolves ran after them into that sea. And when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face. But that sea gathered itself together and became as it had been created. And the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep escaped from that water and went forth into a wilderness, which there was no water, no grass, and they began to open their eyes to see. And I saw the Lord of the sheep pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep going and leading them. And that sheep ascended to the summit of that lofty rock, and the Lord of the sheep sent it to them. And after that I saw the Lord of the sheep, who stood before them, and his appearance was great and terrible and majestic. And all those sheep saw him and were afraid of before his face. And they all feared and trembled because of him. And they cried to that sheep with them, which was amongst them, we are not able to stand before our Lord or to behold him. And that sheep, which led them again, ascended to the summit of that rock. But the sheep began to be blinded and wander from the way which he had showed them. But that sheep wot not thereof. And the Lord of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against them. And that sheep discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. And when they saw it, they feared and trembled at his presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. And that sheep feared its presence, and thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. And I saw in the vision till that sheep became a man, and built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and placed all the sheep in that house. And I saw till this sheep, which had met the sheep which led them, fell asleep. And I saw till all the great sheep perished, and little ones arose in their place, and they came to pasture and approached a stream of water. Then that sheep, their leader, which had become a man, withdrew from them and fell asleep, and all the sheep saw it and cried out over it with a great crying. And I saw till they left off crying for that sheep and crossed that stream of water. And there arose the two sheep as leaders in the place of those which had led them and fallen asleep. And I saw till the sheep came to a godly place and a pleasant and glorious land. And I saw till those sheep were satisfied, and that house stood amongst them in the pleasant land. And sometimes their eyes were open, and sometimes blinded, till another sheep arose and led them and brought them all back, and their eyes were open. And the dogs and the foxes and the wild boars began to devour those sheep, till the Lord of the sheep raised up another sheep, a ram from their midst, which led them. And that ram began to butt on either side those dogs, foxes, and wild boars, till he had destroyed them all. And that sheep whose eyes were opened saw that ram which was amongst the sheep, till he forsook its glory, and began to butt those sheep and trampled upon them, and behaved itself unseemingly. And the Lord of the sheep sent this lamb to another lamb, and raised it to being a ram, and the leader of the sheep instead of that ram which had forsaken its glory. And it went to it and spake to it alone, and raised it to being a ram, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep. But during all these things, those dogs oppressed the sheep. And the first ram pursued that second ram, and that second ram arose and fled before it. And I saw till those dogs pulled down the first ram. And that second ram arose and led the little sheep, and those sheep grew and multiplied. But all the dogs and foxes and wild boars feared and fled before it. And that ram butted and killed the wild beasts, and those wild beasts had no longer any power among the 49 sheep, and robbed them no more of aught. And that ram begot many sheep and fell asleep, and the little sheep became ram in its stead, and became prince and leader of those sheep. And that house became great and broad, and it was built for those sheep. A tower lofty and great was built on the house for the Lord of the sheep. And that house was low, but the tower was elevated and lofty. And the Lord of the sheep stood on that tower, and they offered a full table before him.
So this chapter is very long, and we'll break it over 2 episodes. But a lot of it, I think, is familiar if we are paying attention. It begins with Enoch lying down and having a lot of dreams and lamenting. And then he talks to his grandfather and tells him about the destruction that he sees in his dreams. And his grandfather says something interesting. He says, since you're a believer, make a petition to the Lord for his saving of our remnant. And the remnant idea is something that we see in the Bible. And it's very interesting as it relates to how the Lord preserves his people. So Enoch starts to pray and make this petition. And his petition sounds very similar to me when Moses made an intercession for the people when the Lord said that these people are rebellious and he's just going to wipe them off the face of the earth and then rebuild again through Moses's line. And Moses makes a petition and begs the Lord not to do that for his name's sake. This is in Exodus chapter 32 after the golden calf incident, for reference. Either way, it seems that Enoch's petition is of a similar light, where the Lord doesn't cause everlasting destruction as he says it. And then after that, he starts to outlay his vision. And throughout the vision, I do kind of see where it seems as if the Lord is answering this prayer, showing Enoch in a sense how he's preserving this remnant. And this is where the vision starts to become very familiar. We start to see what seems to either be a retelling of history. And I say retelling because some scholars believe that Enoch was written after a lot of this takes place, or we could say prophecy if we go with the scholars who believe that Enoch was written before these things took place. Either way, what we do see is like a retelling of history, and it goes from the falling of the angels and their devouring of men on earth. Then it goes to Noah, who is seen as a white bull, and his sons, and they build a vessel, and the water comes and destroys the earth, but they get preserved in that vessel, which we know as the ark. And then after that, we see where this white bull has children, and then another set of children, and then somewhere along the way, they become a sheep that has 12 sons or 12 sheep, and then one of the sheep gets taken away by the wolves, which in a sense sounds like Joseph. And then the sheep go and live among the wolves and expand, which sounds like Israel going to live in Egypt. And then somewhere along the timeline, one sheep gets taken away and is sent back to save the rest of the sheep from the wolves. And there's a back and forth that happens, which sounds like Moses and Pharaoh. And then eventually the sheep escape and they are leaving, like the Exodus, and they cross through the water, and then the water covers the wolves, which, as I said before, sounds very familiar to all of us who are reading our Bibles and are familiar with the happenings in the Old Testament. And then after that, the sheep go into the wilderness, and time passes and they become a house or a people, and they flourish in the land, and they have battles with the other wild animals that live around them, the foxes and the boars and the dogs and such and such. And it talks about different sheep arising and leading them after they wander, and then bringing them back like the judges. And then after that, we see something that sounds like Saul and David, and one sheep running from the other sheep, which is David running from Saul. And then we get to verse 89, where this temple is built, or this lofty tower is built, which sounds to me like the temple that Solomon builds for the Lord, the house of the Lord of the sheep. And they have the dedication service with a big feast. So for now, we'll stop at that. And then in the next episode, we'll continue chapter 5, where I believe a lot of this history will continue to unfold. And then we'll probably see some other stuff. I do notice that a lot of this language sounds similar to some of the visions that Daniel has, similar in the sense of using animal imagery to talk about events, which I guess shows some kind of consistency of how these visions are given and then made to be understood. So we'll see how that continues to play out in the next episode. But for now, let's take a break.